Grandpa. I am watching Grandma walk into a cheap motel room with two men right now. My grandson's voice was shaking. I looked down at the phone screen, then I looked to my left. My wife Veronica was fast asleep on the sofa, wrapped in a cashmere blanket. Leo. I whispered into the phone, that is impossible, she is right here. But then he turned the camera, and what I saw made my blood run cold. It was not an affair. It was something far more dangerous. My name is Harrison Bennett. People used to call me Hawk back when I investigated high-level insurance fraud for a living. I thought I had seen every scam in the book. I thought I could spot a lie from a mile away, but I never expected the biggest fraud of my life to happen under my own roof before I tell you how I dismantled the people who tried to destroy my family. Please hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is. It helps me know you are listening. It was a Tuesday night in late October. Outside, the wind was howling through the pines of our estate. Just outside of Boston, inside, the fire was crackling. I was sitting in my leather armchair, reading a biography of Churchill. Veronica, my wife of 12 years, was curled up on the velvet sofa opposite me. She had been complaining of a migraine all day. She took her special herbal tea around 8 and was out like a light by 8:30. She looked peaceful. Her chest rose and fell in a slow, rhythmic slumber. My phone buzzed on the side table. It was a video call from Leo, my 17-year-old grandson. Leo was a good kid, sharp, observant. He did not call late unless it was urgent. I answered. The video was dark and grainy. Grandpa, he whispered, you need to see this. Leo. Where are you? I am at the Motel 6 off the interstate, the one near the old industrial park. What are you doing there? I was driving by and I saw the car. Grandpa, look. He flipped the camera under the flickering orange light of the motel sign. I saw it. A pearl white Lexus LS 500. The license plate was clear as day. HVB 1954. That was my wife's car. My stomach tightened. I do not understand, I said. Keep watching. Leo. Said a door opened, room 104. A woman stepped into the light. She was wearing the beige Burberry trench coat I had bought Veronica for her birthday last week. The same silk scarf, the same platinum blonde hair cut in that specific bob she liked. She was not alone. Two men stepped out to meet her. They were young, rough-looking, covered in tattoos with cigarettes hanging from their lips. One of them grabbed her arm, not affectionately, but possessively. She laughed, threw her head back, and pulled them both into the room. The door slammed shut. Grandpa Leo's voice cracked. Grandma is cheating on you with those guys in a dump like this. I looked at the phone. Then I looked at the woman sleeping 5 feet away from me. Veronica had not moved. She let out a soft snore. I walked over to her. I touched her hand. It was warm. She was real. She was here. Looked back at the screen. The car was real too. The coat was real. The hair was perfect. If I was not standing right here, if I was away on a business trip, I would have believed my eyes. I would have believed my wife was living a double life. But I was Hawk Bennett. I did not panic. I analyzed Leo. I said, my voice low and steady. Listen to me very carefully. Do not get out of the car. Do not go. Knock on that door. But Grandpa, we have to stop her. No, you are going to drive home immediately. Drive slowly. Do not speed. Go to your room and lock the door. But are you going to tell Dad? Are you going to tell Mom? I said. Go home, Leo. Speak to no one. Not your father. Preston. Not your mother. Tiffany. This stays between us for tonight. Do you trust me? Yes. Grandpa, good, hang up now. The screen went black. I stood there in the silence of my living room. The fire was dying down. I walked to the foyer where we kept our coats. Veronica hook was empty. The Burberry trench coat was gone. I walked to the side table where we kept the car keys. The spare fob for the Lexus was there, but her main set, the one with the crystal keychain I gave her, was missing. I went back to the living room and stood over my sleeping wife. She was in a deep, almost unnatural sleep. Her breathing was heavy, too heavy for a simple cold medicine. I looked at her face. The woman in the video had the same hair, the same clothes, the same car. But she walked differently. Veronica walked with a slight hesitation in her left step due to an old tennis injury. The woman in the motel moved with the swagger of a predator. It hit me then, this was not adultery. This was theater. Someone had drugged my wife, stolen her car, stolen her clothes, and was currently staging a performance at a cheap motel to destroy her reputation. And there was only one person in our family who had the same build as Veronica, and a talent for acting. My daughter-in-law, Tiffany. I stood in the dim light of the hallway, my mind racing back to dinner 2 nights ago. Tiffany had been asking strange questions about our estate planning. She had made a joke about how young Veronica looked for 62, and how easy it would be to mistake her for someone younger from a distance. At the time, I thought it was just Tiffany being her usual superficial self. Now I realized it was a rehearsal. I needed to be sure. I walked into the kitchen and opened the trash can near the sink. Right on top sat the empty box of cold medicine Veronica had taken earlier. I picked it up. It felt light, too light. I took out the blister pack. It was empty, but something caught my eye in the bottom of the bin. A small crumpled receipt from a pharmacy across town dated yesterday. Cash payment for a powerful sedative, usually prescribed for severe insomnia. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a cold, calculated rage. They were gaslighting me. They were trying to paint my wife as a cheater, or worse, a woman. Losing her mind so they could challenge our prenup or get power of attorney. I looked at the clock. It was 11:15 p.m. The show at the motel was probably just finishing up. I walked back to the living room. Veronica shifted slightly in her sleep, mumbling something incoherent. I fixed the blanket around her shoulders. Sleep. "Well, my love," I whispered, "you are not the one who is going to have a bad night." I went to my study and unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was my old field kit, from my days as an investigator, a high-resolution camera, a voice recorder, and a spare set of keys to every car in the family, including the ones Preston and Tiffany drove. I sat down and pulled up the GPS tracker app on my iPad. I had installed trackers on all family vehicles 5 years ago, after Lena died. Just for safety, I never told anyone. I watched the blue dot representing Veronica Lexus. It was still stationary at the Motel 6, but then another dot caught my eye. The dot for Tiffany Range Rover. It was parked 2 blocks away from the motel in a dark alley waiting. The narrative was clear. Tiffany drove. Her car to the rendezvous point, met Preston or an accomplice, then took Veronica's car to the motel to stage the scene. Leo seeing them was an accident, a variable they had not calculated, but it was the variable that was going to bring their whole house of cards down. I sat there in the darkness watching the dots on the screen. The anger was gone, replaced by the icy focus of the silencer. They thought they were playing a game with a senile old man. They thought Harrison Bennett was just a retired grandfather who read books by the fire. They had no idea they had just declared war on a man who used to take down criminal syndicates for breakfast. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It was late, but I knew he would answer. Stone, my attorney, and old friend Harrison. Stone's voice was rough with sleep. "Is everything all right?" "No," I said, watching the blue dot on the screen finally start to move away from the motel. "Someone is trying to frame my wife, and I think it is my son and his wife. I need you to prepare a file." Stone paused. The silence on the line was heavy. "What kind of file?" "A war file," I said. "I want a full financial audit of Preston and Tiffany. I want to know every debt, every loan, every credit card, and Stone. I want it by tomorrow morning." I hung up the phone. The Lexus was moving now, heading back toward our house. They were coming to return the car, to return the coat, to put the keys back. They were coming to erase the evidence of their crime, but they were too late. I had seen it. Leo had seen it, and now I was going to watch them do it. I turned off the lights in the study and sat in the dark, waiting for the sound of the engine in the driveway. My own son, my own flesh and blood involved in this. It broke my heart, but it did not break my resolve. If they wanted to play dirty, I would show them what filth really looked like. The game had just begun, and I was holding all the aces. I walked back into the living room, where Veronica was still deep in that chemically induced coma on the velvet sofa. She looked like a sleeping beauty. But I knew the dragon was waiting outside, not in a fairy tale, but in a black Range Rover down the street. On the side table, her empty tea mug sat on a coaster. Earl Grey with a hint of lavender, her favorite. But as I lifted the cup to my nose beneath the floral scent, there was something else, a metallic, acrid smell that did not belong in a tea bag. I dipped my finger into the brown sludge at the bottom and touched it to my tongue. It was not sugar. It was bitter, sharp, unmistakable. I knew that taste from my years investigating insurance claims involving suspicious overdoses. It was a high-grade sedative, likely a benzodiazepine crushed and dissolved. They had not just stolen her car, they had poisoned her right in front of me. I went to my study and locked the door. If I was going to fight this war, I needed eyes and ears everywhere. I logged into the family cellular account on my secure laptop. I paid the bills, so I held the administrative keys. I pushed a silent software update to Preston and Tiffany phones disguised as a carrier security patch. It was a piece of military-grade spyware I had acquired years ago from a contact in intelligence. Within minutes, I had a mirror of their devices on my secure server. Every text, every call, every location, ping would now come straight to me. I was not just a father anymore. I was the surveillance state. Then came the sound I had been waiting for, the soft hum of an engine in the driveway. I moved to the window, keeping behind the heavy velvet drapes. The Lexus glided into the garage like a ghost. I watched as a shadow slipped out from the driver's side. It was Tiffany, still wearing my wife coat. She moved quickly, expertly. A moment later, Preston car pulled up quietly on the street. She jumped in and they sped away into the night, like thieves who thought they had just pulled off the heist of the century. I went down to the mudroom. On the hallway table, right where Veronica always left them, lay the crystal keychain. They had put everything back exactly as it was. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. If I had not seen the video, if Leo had not called, I would have woken up the next morning believing nothing had happened. I would have been the clueless old man they thought I was. The sun rose over the estate, casting long, deceiving shadows across the lawn. Veronica woke up around 9, groggy and disoriented. She complained of a heavy head, a lingering fog that would not lift. I made her fresh coffee, black and strong. I did not tell her about the poison. Not yet. She needed to act natural, and Veronica was a terrible liar. If she knew her fear would give us away, she had to remain the unsuspecting victim a little while longer. Then the doorbell rang. It was Tiffany. She breezed in, carrying a basket of high-end pastries and a tray of overpriced coffees, wearing a pastel yellow sundress that screamed innocence. She kissed my cheek, leaving a smear of sticky lip gloss. "Good morning, Dad," she chirped, her voice too bright, too loud. I brought breakfast. I thought Mom might need a pick-me-up after her rough night. She walked into the living room where Veronica was nursing her coffee. "Oh, Mom, you look exhausted," Tiffany cooed, her voice dripping with synthetic concern. "Are you feeling okay? You know, Preston and I were talking just last night. We are worried about you. You have been so forgetful lately. Remember last week, when you lost your reading glasses, and now you are sleeping in until 9. It is just not like you." I watched her from the kitchen doorway. It was subtle, insidious. She was planting seeds, seeds of doubt, seeds of incompetence. She was not just being mean, she was building a narrative. Veronica rubbed her temples, looking vulnerable. "I suppose I have been a bit tired lately," she admitted, her voice weak. "Maybe I am getting old. Maybe I am slowing down." "Nonsense," I said, stepping into the room. I kept my voice light, jovial, "just a bad night." "Sleep, Tiffany, we all have them." Tiffany turned to me, her eyes widening with feigned seriousness. "I do not know, Dad." It is more than that. I have noticed she gets confused about simple things like where she parked the car or what day it is. Have you noticed it? Dad, honestly? Have you noticed Mom slipping? I looked at my daughter-in-law. I saw the calculation behind her mascara. I saw the greed tightening the corners of her mouth. She was looking for confirmation. She wanted me to be her ally in declaring my own wife unfit. I paused, letting the silence stretch just enough to make her comfortable. Now that you mention it, I said, lying through my teeth, she has been a little scattered. Maybe we should see a doctor. Tiffany's face lit up. It was microscopic, a tiny flare of triumph in her pupils. But I saw it. That would be wise, Dad. Just to be safe, we know a great specialist. Dr. Eris, he is very discreet, very good with elderly cognitive decline. And there it was, the trap snapped shut. They did not want to kill her. That was too messy, too risky. They wanted to incapacitate her legally. They were building a case for dementia, for early onset Alzheimer. If they could get a diagnosis, if they could get a court to declare Veronica incompetent, they could take control, they could become her conservators. They could freeze her assets, access the trust funds, and control the inheritance. It was a legal kidnapping applied to a 62-year-old woman. I took a bite of the croissant Tiffany had brought. It tasted like sawdust and betrayal. I smiled at her, a tired, worried old man smile. You are such a good daughter, Tiffany. Thank you for looking out for us. She beamed, patting my arm condescendingly. That is what family is for Dad. We just want what is best for Mom. I watched her leave an hour later, skipping down the front steps like she had just won the lottery. She pulled out her phone as she got into her car. My pocket buzzed. The spyware was working. I pulled out my phone and read the text she just sent to Preston. He bought it. The old fool thinks she is losing her marbles. Step 1 complete. Get the doctor ready. We are going to need the paperwork by Friday. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the delete button. But I did not press it. I saved it. I archived it. Step 1 was indeed complete, Tiffany. But you did not just fool the old man. You just handed him the shovel to dig your grave. You want to play the medical game. You want to question sanity. Fine. I will show you what madness really looks like. I will show you the insanity city of crossing Harrison Bennett. I walked back into the house. Veronica was looking at the calendar, a frown on her face. Harrison, she said softly. Did I go out last night? My coat feels damp and there is mud on the floor in the hallway. I walked over and kissed her forehead. You were here with me all night. My love. You must have been dreaming. I lied to protect her peace, but as I looked at the mud on the floor, the mud from the motel parking lot that Tiffany had carelessly tracked in, I knew the time for protection was over. It was time for retribution. They wanted to paint a picture of a crazy woman. I would paint them a masterpiece of their own destruction. I drove the black sedan out of the estate gates and headed toward the industrial side of town. The morning sun was bright, but it brought no warmth to the cold fury sitting in my chest. I pulled into the parking lot of the Motel 6. It looked even grittier in the daylight. The paint was peeling, the asphalt was cracked, and the air smelled of exhaust and bad decisions. This was not a place Veronica would ever set foot in, not in a million years, which made the charade even more grotesque. I walked into the lobby. The bell above the door chimed weakly. The clerk behind the counter was a young man with greasy hair and a neck tattoo. He barely looked up from his phone. I did not have a badge anymore. I did not have a warrant. But I had something that spoke louder in places like this. I walked up to the counter and placed 5 crisp $100 bills on the scratched laminate surface. The clerk looked up, his eyes widened slightly. He looked at the money, then at me. I did not smile, I did not blink. I need to see the security footage from last night. Parking lot camera facing room 104 between 10 and 11 p.m. I said, my voice low and hard. He hesitated for a second, glancing at the manager door behind him. No questions, I added, sliding another $100 bill across the counter. Just the files. He swiped the money into his pocket with a practiced hand and turned the monitor around. He tapped a few keys and the grainy black and white feed appeared. He scrolled back the timestamp, read 10:14 p.m. There it was, the pearl-white Lexus pulled into the frame. The driver door opened and the woman stepped out. I leaned in closer, squinting at the screen. The disguise was terrifyingly accurate. The platinum wig was styled perfectly. The Burberry coat was belted. Exactly how Veronica wore hers from a distance. Anyone would swear it was my wife, but I was looking for the details. The devil's in the details. Tiffany closed the car door with her hip. Veronica never did that. Veronica always used her hand, protecting the finish. Tiffany moved with a sharp, aggressive energy, whereas Veronica flowed. Tiffany checked her reflection in the side mirror, adjusting the wig. I saw her face clearly for a split second in the harsh light of the parking lot lamp. It was a face of concentration, not passion, not guilt, just a job to be done. Then the men appeared from the shadows. They were the same men Leo had seen, but now on the larger screen I saw what my grandson had missed. They were not lovers, meeting for a secret tryst. Lovers do not carry heavy equipment. One of the men had a large black duffel bag slung over his shoulder, the way he carried it. The weight of it told me it wasn't clothes, it was gear. The other man had a tripod strapped to his back. I watched them converge at the door of room 104. Tiffany did not kiss them, she did not embrace them. She unlocked the door and jerked her head, ushering them inside like a director managing a set. I looked at the clerk. Do you have a camera in the hallway? Or a better angle of the door? I asked. He nodded and clicked another camera view. This one was positioned above the vending machine, looking down the external corridor. It gave a clear view of the window of room 104. The curtains were drawn, but there was a gap. A small slice of space where the fabric did not meet. I watched the screen intently. The men went inside. 20 minutes passed. Nothing happened on the outside, but then the door opened slightly. One of the men stepped out to smoke a cigarette, leaving the door ajar just enough. The angle was perfect. I could see into the room. I saw Tiffany. She had taken off the Burberry coat underneath. She was wearing something Veronica would rather die than wear. Cheap red lingerie, garish and vulgar. She sat on the edge of the bed holding a glass pipe, the kind used for crack cocaine or methamphetamines. She's sewn, not smoking it. She was posing with it. She threw her head back, feigning ecstasy, while the second man, the one with the tripod, circled her with a professional video camera. They were filming a movie, a sordid, staged piece of filth designed to destroy a reputation. She mimed, snorting lines of powder from the nightstand, then fell back onto the mattress, writhing as if in a drug-induced haze. The man with the camera moved in for a close-up, capturing every moment of the fake depravity. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me, followed by a clarity so sharp it cut. This was not just about making Veronica look mentally unstable. This was strategic. This was financial warfare. I remembered the prenup. I had written it myself 12 years ago when I married Veronica. Preston had been furious back then, convinced she was a gold digger, so I had included strict morality clauses to appease him. If Veronica was found to be unfaithful, or if she was proven to be using illegal narcotics, the trust would be voided. She would get nothing, no alimony, no settlement. She would be thrown out on the street with the clothes on her back. That was the play. Preston and Tiffany were not just trying to take control of the estate, they were trying to cut Veronica out completely. They wanted to trigger the morality clause. They were creating video evidence of infidelity and drug abuse. Indisputable proof that would stand up in court. They would leak this tape or send it to my lawyer, anonymously claiming they found it. They were going to humiliate her publicly, destroy her dignity, and leave her penniless while they collected the entire inheritance. It was a plan so cruel, so devoid of humanity, that it took my breath away. My own son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, was willing to destroy an innocent woman, life for money. I looked at the screen one last time. Tiffany was now laughing, high-fiving the cameraman. The scene was over. They had what they needed. She began to dress, putting the Burberry coat back on, buttoning it up. transforming back into the dutiful wife, the innocent victim. I pulled the flash drive from my pocket. Download it. I told the clerk all of it. He did as he was asked, his hands shaking slightly. He could see the look on my face. He knew he was in the presence of a violence he did not understand. I took the drive. It felt cold. In my hand, cold and heavy like a judge gavel. I walked out of the motel into the bright, indifferent sun. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the plastic dongle in my hand. This was not just evidence, it was a death sentence for their ambitions. They had staged a play thinking they were the directors, but they had forgotten that every play needs an audience, and I was the only audience that mattered. I put the car in gear, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They wanted to talk about morality. They wanted to talk about vice, fine. I would give them a lesson in morality. They would never forget. I would show them what happens when you try to frame the wife of the silencer. The investigation was over. The trial was about to begin, and I was the judge, jury, and executioner. The heavy oak door of my study clicked shut, sealing me in with the silence and the smell of old paper and leather. Outside, the autumn wind battered the window panes, a restless sound that mirrored the storm brewing in my gut. I sat behind my desk, the same desk where I had planned takedowns of syndicates that stole millions, but this was different. This was personal. I picked up the phone, the secure line that didn't appear on the monthly bill, and dialed Stone. It rang once, twice. Hawk. Stone's voice was crisp, alert, despite the hour. You don't call this line unless the building is on fire. The building is standing stone, but the foundation is rotting, I said, my voice flat, devoid of the tremor I felt in my hands. I need you to run a deep dive, not a standard credit check. I want a forensic audit on Veronica. Every account, every liability, every shadow transaction attached to her social security number. Harrison Veronica. She hasn't touched a finance form in 12 years. You handle everything, Stone said, hesitation creeping in. Is this about the incident you mentioned? It is, and Stone dig deep. Look for secondary lines of credit, high-risk loans, anything that doesn't show up on a standard Equifax report. I have a feeling we are not looking for pocket change. Give me an hour, Stone said. The line went dead. I spent that hour staring at the portrait of Preston hanging over the fireplace. He was 10 years old in the picture, holding a baseball bat, looking at me with hero worship. Where had that boy gone? When did he become a man who would drug his stepmother and film her in a motel room? The clock on the mantel ticked, counting down the seconds of my denial. 45 minutes later, the phone rang. Harrison? Stone's voice was different now. It was heavy. Are you sitting down? I am standing. Tell me. It is a massacre, Stone said, the professional veneer cracking. Veronica's identity has been harvested. It is not just stolen. It has been strip-mined. I am looking at 3 home equity lines of credit taken out against the vacation property in Cape Cod. There are 5 maxed-out credit cards from issuers I usually see in predatory lending lawsuits. And there is a signature loan from a private equity firm that charges 40% interest. I gripped the edge of the desk, the wood biting into my palm. The total Stone. Principal and interest. You are looking at $2.4 million, Harrison. 2.4 million. The number hung in the air like toxic smoke. It was a staggering amount of liquid cash to burn through in secret. How? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. How does she sign for this? I hold the deeds. I monitor the mail. That is the part that scares me, Stone said. I pulled the digital images of the promissory notes. The signatures are Veronica's. Perfect matches. And every single one of them is notarized, stamped, sealed, and recorded. Who is the notary? A woman named Sarah Jenkins. State commission number expires in 2 years. Her record is clean, Harrison. On paper, this is ironclad. If you go to court, a judge sees a notary seal, he sees a valid contract. Sarah Jenkins. The name rattled around in my brain trying to find a purchase. I put the phone on speaker and walked over to the bookshelf, where Tiffany kept a stack of old photo albums she had brought over when she first married Preston, a desperate attempt to force intimacy by sharing her glory days. I pulled down a dusty volume labeled Alpha Chi Omega, 2005. I flipped through the glossy pages of college parties and sorority events. And there on the last page was a photo of Tiffany younger, sharper, arm in arm, with a girl with distinctive frizzy red hair. The caption was written in silver marker, Tiff and Sarah, partners in crime. I found her, I said to the empty room. Stone cross-referenced Sarah Jenkins with Tiffany's undergraduate class at UMass. You will find they were roommates. If that is true, Stone said, his voice hardening, then we are looking at conspiracy to commit fraud. Racketeering, even. We are looking at a desperate cash grab, I corrected. $2.4 million does not just vanish into handbags and vacations. This smells like panic money. I went back to my desk and woke up my laptop. The spyware I had installed on Preston's phone was running in the background, a silent sentinel. I bypassed his texts and calls this time. I went straight to the browser history. It was a digital suicide note. Crypto exchanges, high-leverage trading platforms, obscure forums promising 10,000% returns on moonshot coins. My son, the man who looked down on manual labor, had tried to gamble his way to a fortune. I opened his trading dashboard. The numbers were bathed in red. He had leveraged positions on coins that had crashed months ago. He had kept doubling down, chasing the loss, the gambler's fallacy in real time. The realized loss was staggering $3 million. He wasn't just broke. He was underwater. But banks don't break your legs when you default. Banks sue you. Preston was terrified, acting with the erratic frenzy of a trapped animal. That meant he owed someone who didn't use lawyers. I opened his encrypted messaging app, scrolling past the mundane chats with Tiffany, until I found a thread labeled only as The Accountant. The messages were brief, brutal. Accountant payment missed. The clock is ticking. Preston, I need more time. The assets are tied up in trust. I'm working on unlocking them. Accountant. You have 48 hours. Or we collect collateral. And then an image. It downloaded slowly on my secure connection. It was a photo taken from a car window. It showed Leo, my grandson, walking out of his private school gates, his backpack slung over one shoulder, laughing with a friend. The text underneath read, "Nice kid. Shame if he had an accident." The rage that hit me then was not hot. It was absolute zero. It froze the blood in my veins. My son had not just stolen from me. He had not just framed his stepmother. He had exposed my grandson, his own flesh and blood, to wolves. He had pawned his son's safety to cover his own incompetence. They needed Veronica out of the way to trigger the inheritance clauses. They needed the money to pay the sharks before the sharks ate Leo. I picked up the phone. Stone, I am here. I want you to buy the debt. Excuse me. The $2.4 million in loans, the credit card debt, all of it. Contact the lenders, set up a shell company, call it Nemesis Holdings. Buy the paper. I want to be the creditor. Harrison, that is throwing good money after bad. You can just report the fraud. No, I snapped. If I report the fraud, the accounts freeze, the investigation takes months. The mob won't wait months. They will hurt Leo. I need to control the leverage. I want to own the debt. I want to own them. And Preston's gambling debts? Stone asked softly. The $3 million to the sharks. I will handle the sharks, I said. Just buy the paper, Stone. Tonight. I hung up and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I moved aside a false bottom to reveal a burner phone I kept for emergencies, a relic from a life I thought I had left behind. I dialed a number that hadn't changed in 20 years. A voice answered on the second ring. Yellow cab. It was a code. This is Hawk, I said. I need a meeting with the Black Dragon Syndicate. Tell them I am buying out a distressed asset named Preston Bennett. There was a pause. That is expensive meat, Hawk. I am paying full price, I said. But the interest stops today. And if anyone looks at my grandson again, I will burn their operation to the bedrock. Message received. I put the phone down. The financial bleed was stopped. I had applied the tourniquet. But the limb my son was gangrenous. He had sold us all out. I looked at the screen where the dots of their cars were stationary at their home. They were sleeping, perhaps thinking they had gotten away with it. They didn't know that their debts had just changed hands. They didn't know that tomorrow they wouldn't be answering to a bank or a thug. They would be answering to me. And I was a creditor who did not forgive. 2 days later, we gathered for Sunday dinner, a tradition I had insisted on maintaining, even though the air in the dining room was thick enough to choke on. Preston and Tiffany sat across from me, their faces masks of filial concern, while Veronica picked at her roast chicken. Her hands trembling slightly, the drugs they were slipping. Her were cumulative, she was losing time, she was losing words. And worst of all, she was losing her spark. She looked at me with frightened, confused eyes, trusting only me, in a world that was suddenly tilting on its axis. Leo sat at the end of the table, silent and pale. He had not spoken a word since he arrived, his eyes darting between his parents and me. He knew too much, and the weight of it was crushing him. I wanted to tell him it was okay. I wanted to tell him the cavalry was coming, but I could not break cover, not yet. I needed them to make their final move. I needed them to commit the act that would seal their fate in front of witnesses. The conversation was stilted, filled with pregnant pauses and sharp glances. Tiffany was wearing a high-necked blouse and a cross necklace, performing the role of the pious, worried daughter-in-law to perfection. "Oh, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with syrup. "You have barely touched your food. Are you feeling nauseous again?" I read that nausea is a common side effect of the condition we talked about. Veronica looked up, startled. "I am just not hungry." "Tiffany, I am fine." Preston cleared his throat, setting his fork down with a heavy clatter. "Dad," he said, looking at me with eyes that would not quite meet mine. I did not want to say anything before because I hoped I was wrong, but I saw Mom's car again yesterday. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my water. "Watching the performance where Preston downtown," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper near the combat zone. "You know the area, Dad, the hourly motels, the drug corners. I saw the Lexus parked behind that dive bar on 4th Street. I drove past twice, just drove, to be sure." It was a lie, a clumsy, desperate lie. The GPS tracker showed the Lexus had not left the garage in 48 hours, but Veronica did not know that she looked at Preston, her mouth opening in shock. "Preston, that is a lie." "I have not driven in days," Harrison tell him. I patted her hand, keeping my face mask of concern. "Preston, are you sure that is a serious accusation?" "Son, I am sure, Dad." Preston insisted, gaining confidence from my apparent doubt. "Why would I make that up?" "I am worried about her safety. She is wandering, Dad. She is going into dangerous places." Then Tiffany made her move, the centerpiece of the evening. "Oh goodness, I almost forgot," she said, reaching under the table for Veronica's purse, which hung on the back of the chair. "Mom asked me to get her lipstick earlier, and I think I left my phone in there. Do you mind, Mom?" Before Veronica could answer, Tiffany pulled the bag onto her lap. She rummaged around for a second, her movements quick and jerky like a magician forcing a card. Then she gasped, a loud theatrical intake of breath that stopped the conversation dead. She pulled her hand out slowly, holding something that did not belong in a grandmother's purse. It was a pair of men's underwear, cheap synthetic leopard print briefs, the kind sold in novelty shops or gas stations. "Oh my God," Tiffany whispered, dropping them onto the white tablecloth as if they burned her. "Mom, what are these?" The silence that followed was absolute. Veronica stared at the object, her face draining of all color. "Harrison," she stammered, I have never seen those before in my life. Someone put them there. Harrison, please, you have to believe me." I looked at the underwear, then at Tiffany. She was covering her mouth with her hand, eyes wide with fake shock. But I saw the tension in her shoulders, the adrenaline of the gambler pushing all his chips in, Dad. Tiffany said, her voice trembling, "This is worse than we thought. This is hypersexuality. It is a symptom of frontotemporal dementia. They lose their inhibitions. They collect trophies." "Enough." Veronica stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. "I am not crazy, and I am not a pervert. You are doing this. You are lying." She looked at me, pleading for me to end it, to defend her, seeing her like that. Defending her sanity against this orchestrated gaslighting broke my heart, but I had to play the part. "Veronica, calm down," I said softly. "Please, sit down. Everyone is just worried." "You believe them," she whispered, the betrayal in her eyes cutting deeper than any knife you believe. "I am crazy." I did not answer. I looked down at my plate. Let the silence do the work. Let them think they had won. Veronica sobbed and ran from the room, her footsteps echoing on the stairs as she fled to the sanctuary of our bedroom. Tiffany let out a long sigh, shaking her head. "Poor Harrison," she said, reaching across to pat my hand. "It is advancing so fast, we might need to consider that facility sooner rather than later for her own safety." I pulled my hand away slowly. "I think I need some air," I said, standing up. Leo stood up too, his chair knocking over. "I will go with you, Grandpa, no." Tiffany's voice snapped like a whip. "Sit down. Leo, Grandpa needs space to process this tragedy." "But Mom," Leo protested, his voice rising in pitch. "I need to tell him something. I need to tell him about the..." Tiffany moved faster than I thought possible. She grabbed Leo by the upper arm, her fingers digging into his bicep. Hard, she yanked him down into the chair, leaning in close, her face inches from his. "Stop it," she hissed low enough that she thought. I could not hear, but I was the silencer. I heard everything stop. "Making up stories. Your grandmother is sick, very sick. Do not confuse Grandpa anymore with your lies. If you say one more word, you will give him a heart attack. Do you want to kill Grandpa? Is that what you want?" Leo winced, tears springing to his eyes from the pain of her grip. I saw her knuckles turn white. She was not just holding him. She was hurting him. She was pinching the tender flesh of his inner arm, a vicious, cruel punishment designed to silence him through pain. I saw Leo's face crumble, the spirit going out of him. He looked at me, then looked down, defeated. "I am sorry, Grandpa," he whispered. I do not want Grandma to be sick." Tiffany released him, smoothing his shirt, smiling that shark smile. "That is a good boy. Leo, we all just want Grandma to get help." I stood by the patio door, my hand resting on the handle, looking at the red mark blossoming on my grandson's arm under his sleeve. I felt a physical shift in my body, a click like the safety coming off a weapon. They had stolen my money, fine. They had drugged my wife, unforgivable. But now they had put their hands on my grandson. They had used pain and fear to silence a child, to protect their crimes. The line had been crossed. There was no going back. There was no mercy left in me, not a drop. Preston sat there drinking his wine, watching his wife abuse his son, and said nothing. He was an accomplice to child abuse. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air, taking a deep breath to steady the rage that threatened to make me shake. I did not want to just stop them anymore. I wanted to obliterate them. I wanted to leave them with nothing. Not a penny. Not a shred of dignity. Not a moment of peace. I pulled out my burner phone and typed a text to Stone: "Execute the purchase of the debt, now tonight, and tell the contact at the precinct. I am ready to file charges first thing tomorrow morning." I looked back through the window. Tiffany was eating dessert, looking satisfied. Preston was pouring more wine. Leo was rubbing his arm, staring at the empty chair where his grandmother had been. "You think you are winning, Tiffany," I thought. Watching her laugh at something, Preston said, You think you have checkmated the old man, but you forgot one thing. You never checkmate a man who has nothing left to lose. And thanks to you, I have just decided that I am willing to burn this whole house down, just to see you choke on the smoke. I walked back inside, my face a mask of defeat, my eyes dead calm. I am going to check on Veronica, I said. My voice sounding old and broken, you two. You two do what you think is best. Tiffany nodded solemnly. We will call the lawyers in the morning, Dad. We will get the paperwork started for the conservatorship. It is the only way, yes, I said, looking at the bruise forming on Leo's arm. It is the only way. I walked up the stairs, listening to them celebrate their victory downstairs. They were toasting to their success, to the money they thought was theirs. They did not know that the man walking up the stairs was not a victim, he was the Grim Reaper, and I was coming for their souls. The morning sun filtered through the heavy curtains of the library, illuminating dust motes, dancing in the air, like tiny suspended lies, and I sat in my wingback chair, a cup of cold coffee untouched on the side table, my hands resting on the head of my cane. Not because I needed it, but because it was part of the costume I was wearing. The costume of a defeated, tired old man. Preston and Tiffany sat on the sofa opposite me, holding hands, their faces composed into masks of solemn support. But I could see the energy vibrating off them, the nervous excitement of hyenas circling a wounded lion. They were waiting for the surrender. They were waiting for me to roll over and expose my throat. I let out a long, shuddering sigh and looked at the floor. I have been thinking all night. I said, my voice raspy and weak, about what happened at dinner, about the underwear, about the motel. I paused, letting the silence stretch, letting them lean in. You were right. I whispered the words, tasting like bile in my mouth. I have been blind. I did not want to see it. But Veronica, she is not the woman I married anymore. She is sick. And I have been putting everyone in danger by denying it. Tiffany squeezed Preston's hand. I saw her knuckles turn white with suppressed glee. Dad, she cooed, her voice thick with fake sympathy. We know how hard this is for you. We do not blame you. Denial is the first stage of grief. I looked up at them, making sure my eyes looked watery and confused. I cannot let this continue, I said firmly. I cannot let her destroy the family legacy. I cannot let her squander what I built for you. For Leo, Preston nodded eagerly, leaning forward. Exactly, Dad. We just want to protect the estate. We want to protect you. I know, son, I said, patting my chest pocket where my heart would be, if I had not turned it into stone hours ago. I am going to call Stone this morning. I am going to tell him to draft a new will. I am going to remove Veronica as the primary beneficiary, and I am going to initiate the proceedings to grant you power of attorney over the family trust. The air in the room changed instantly. The tension snapped, replaced by a rush of endorphins. I could practically smell their greed. It was a thick, musky scent. Preston let out a breath he had been holding for years. Thank you. Dad, he said, his voice trembling with relief. You are doing the right thing. We will take care of everything, Tiffany added, her eyes already calculating the shopping spree she would go on. We will find the best facility for Mom, somewhere nice, somewhere quiet. Yes, somewhere quiet, I repeated, thinking of a jail cell. I am going to go rest now. I feel very tired. Call the lawyers. Son, get the ball rolling. I watched them leave the library. They walked slowly until they were out of my sight, but I heard their footsteps quicken in the hallway. I heard the front door close, and then through the window I saw them in the driveway, high-fiving each other like teenagers who had just scored a bag of weed they thought they had won. They thought the king was dead. I waited until their car disappeared down the long driveway. Then I stood up, I straightened my back, the cane clattered to the floor, forgotten the old man was gone. The silencer was back. I went to my desk and opened the safe hidden behind the paneling. Inside were the bearer bonds, the gold coins, and the deeds to properties I had acquired over 40 years of hunting. White-collar criminals, assets that did not exist on any digital ledger, assets that Stone and I kept for rainy days. It was pouring rain. I spent the next 4 hours on the encrypted line with Stone and a broker in Zurich. I needed liquidity, and I needed it fast. I liquidated a vintage car collection stored in a warehouse in Virginia. I sold a silent partnership, stake in a commercial real estate firm in Miami. I moved money through 3 different offshore entities, layering the transactions so deep that even the IRS would need a year to untangle them. By 2 in the afternoon, I had $3.2 million sitting in a holding account of a company called Phoenix Holdings, a shell company registered in Delaware, with a nominee director who did not exist on paper. Phoenix Holdings had one purpose: to rise from the ashes and burn everything to the ground. I picked up the burner phone and dialed the number for the Black Dragon Syndicate, the contact Preston had been terrified of. A voice answered, gravelly and suspicious. "Who is this?" "This is the buyer," I said, my voice flat and businesslike. "I understand you hold a distressed asset, a promissory note from a Mr. Preston Bennett." There was a silence on the line, then a dark chuckle. "Mr. Bennett is in deep water. Are you a family member looking to pay his ransom?" "I am an investor," I corrected him. "I am looking to purchase the debt. I want to buy the note, the principal and the interest. I want the full assignment of rights." "Why would you do that?" the voice asked. "He is a deadbeat. He does not have the money." "Because I do have the money," I said, "and I am willing to pay you 80 cents on the dollar right now. Cash wire transfer, complete settlement." Today, the thug on the other end did the math. Getting 80% of a bad debt immediately was better than spending resources, breaking legs, and hoping for pennies. It was a business decision. "Done," the voice said. "Send the wire. We will transfer the title of the debt to your entity." I hung up and texted the routing numbers to Stone within an hour. The transaction was complete. The Black Dragon Syndicate was paid off. They were out of the picture. They had their money, and they washed their hands of Preston Bennett. I sat back in my chair, holding the digital confirmation. The PDF file on my screen was a thing of beauty. It was a transfer of debt agreement stating that Preston Bennett now owed $3.2 million, plus accruing interest, not to a gang of street thugs, but to Phoenix Holdings. And I was Phoenix Holdings. Preston did not know it yet. He thought his problem was the mob. He thought he needed to get control of my estate to pay them off. He did not realize that the monster under his bed had just been replaced by the devil himself. The mob would have just broken his legs. I was going to break his life. I printed the document and placed it in a plain manila folder. I slid it into the top drawer of my desk, right next to the surveillance photos and the flash drive from the motel. The trap was set, the bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for them to make their move on Veronica, once they filed that petition for conservatorship, once they stood before a judge and lied under oath. I would not only defend her, I would counterattack with a weapon they never saw coming. I walked out of the library and found Veronica in the garden. She was pruning her roses, looking pale and fragile. The drugs were still in her system, but she was fighting them. I walked up behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist. "Harrison," she said, leaning back into me. "I feel so strange, like I am floating. I know my love," I whispered, kissing her hair, "but I have an anchor now. Just hold on a little longer. The storm is coming, but we are the ones who will be controlling the lightning." She did not understand what I meant, but she squeezed my hand, trusting me, trusting the man who had promised to protect her. I looked towards the gate where Preston Carr would return later that evening. He would come back smiling, thinking he was the heir apparent, thinking he was safe. He had no idea that his debt had just been called in, and the new landlord was about to start an eviction proceeding that would leave him with nothing but the clothes on his back. I felt a cold, dark satisfaction settle in my gut. It was not happiness. It was something harder, something more durable. It was the feeling of justice loading a gun and clicking off the safety. The white Mercedes pulled into the circular driveway at exactly 9 in the morning. Tiffany hopped out, wearing a crisp white blazer and designer jeans, looking every bit the concerned daughter-in-law taking charge she did. Not look like a woman about to commit medical assault, she looked like a soccer mom on her way to brunch. That was the terrifying brilliance of Tiffany. She hid her venom behind a smile so bright it could blind you. I stood in the doorway, holding Veronica's hand. My wife was trembling slightly. She was wearing a simple blue dress, the one she wore to church. She looked fragile, small, and terrified. I squeezed her fingers 3 times. A signal code. We had established the night before 3 squeezes meant you are safe. 3 squeezes meant I am watching. 3 squeezes meant follow the script, Harrison. Veronica whispered, her eyes darting to the approaching Tiffany. Do I really have to go? You have to, I said softly, leaning in to kiss her cheek. Trusting me was the hardest thing I had ever asked her to do. She knew they wanted to hurt her. She knew they wanted to declare her insane. But she did not know the full extent of my countermeasures. She did not know that the battlefield had already been prepped. Tiffany bounded up the steps. Hi, Mom, ready for your checkup, she chirped, grabbing Veronica's arm with a grip that looked affectionate but was actually controlling. Dad. Do not worry, we will be back by lunch. Dr. Aris just wants to run a few cognitive tests, maybe some blood work to see why she is so foggy. I nodded, playing the part of the anxious, helpless husband. Thank you, Tiffany. I just want her to get better. I hate seeing her like this. We all do, Dad, we all do. She lied, looking me dead in the eye. I watched them drive away, the Mercedes disappearing down the long road lined with autumn trees, as soon as they were out of sight. I walked back into my study and opened my laptop. I did not need to follow them physically. I was already there, digitally and financially. The clinic was called Serenity Wellness, a private facility tucked away in a quiet office park. It marketed itself as a boutique medical center for the elite, but I knew what it really was. It was a pay-to-play operation where wealthy families sent their problem children to dry out, or their inconvenient elders to be medicated into silence. Dr. Aris, the man Tiffany had hired, was not a healer. He was a businessman with a medical license and a gambling debt. I had found his financial records along with Preston. He was compromised. He was desperate, and he was cheap. But I had not bribed Dr. Aris. That would have been too risky. He was too close to Tiffany. Instead, I had gone for the weak link, the person who actually administered the care, the person who held the needle. 2 days ago, I had met with the head nurse, a woman named Carla, in a diner 3 towns over. Carla was a single mother with a mountain of debt and a moral compass that was flexible but not broken. I showed her the file on Tiffany. I showed her the fake videos, the plan to institutionalize a healthy woman, and then I showed her a briefcase containing $50,000 in cash. I gave her a choice. She could be an accomplice to a felony kidnapping and lose her license when I inevitably brought the hammer down, or she could be my inside woman. She could ensure that whatever cocktail Dr. Aris ordered was swapped for saline solution. She could ensure Veronica was safe. Carla took the money. She was terrified, but she took it. Now I sat in my chair watching the GPS dot of the Mercedes arrive at the clinic. I switched audio feeds, listening through the bug. In Tiffany's purse, I heard the clinic doors slide open, the click of Tiffany heels on the polished floor, the hushed tones of the reception area. Mrs. Bennett, right this way. Dr. Aris is expecting you, a voice said. Visualized the room sterile. White walls, bad, abstract art, the smell of antiseptic, masking, the smell of corruption. They led Veronica into an exam room. I heard the door close, then Tiffany. Voice dropped, the sickly sweet tone gone, replaced by cold command. Listen to me, Mom. You are going to do exactly what the doctor says. Do not embarrass me. Do not make a scene. Just take the medicine. It will help you. Relax. I am not sick, Tiffany. Veronica's voice was shaking. I do not need medicine. You are sick, Tiffany snapped. You are seeing things. You are collecting garbage. You are losing your mind. Harrison sees it too. He is just too polite to say it, but he is tired of it. Mom? He is tired of babysitting a crazy old woman. The cruelty of it made my jaw clench. She was weaponizing my silence, using my fake complicity to break Veronica's spirit. Then Dr. Aris entered. His voice was smooth, oily. Mrs. Bennett, hello. I understand we are having some episodes, some agitation, confusion. I am fine, Veronica insisted. The doctor ignored her. I think a mild sedative to calm the nerves, and then a psychotropic challenge test to check for early dementia markers. It is standard procedure. Nurse prepare 5 milligrams of haloperidol and 2 of lorazepam. That cocktail would have turned an elephant into a zombie. It would have caused slurring confusion. Drooling exactly the symptoms they needed for the camera, I held my breath, waiting. I heard the clink of glass vials, the tearing of a plastic syringe wrapper. This was the moment. This was the trust fall. Carla, the nurse I had bribed, spoke up, her voice steady. Here you go, doctor. Prepared just as you asked, I exhaled. Carla had done it. The syringe was filled with saline water, harmless hydration, but Veronica did not know that she thought she was about to be drugged. She thought she was about to lose control. I heard the sharp intake of breath from my wife as the needle went in. The quiet apology from the nurse, which was likely genuine. Then the doctor left the room, leaving Tiffany alone with Veronica. Now came the performance I had coached Veronica the night before. I told her they are going to try to drug you. It might feel real, but you have to fight it. You have to give them what they want. Scream, cry, talk nonsense. Let them record it. Give them the evidence they think they need, because that evidence will be their confession. There was a silence in the room for a few minutes. Tiffany was waiting, watching, checking her watch expectantly. Then Veronica began. She started with a low moan, a sound of distress. I heard the rustle of fabric as she shifted on the exam table. I feel funny, she mumbled, her voice slurring intentionally. There we go, Tiffany whispered. I heard the distinct beep of a phone camera starting to record. Tell me how you feel. Mom, tell the camera. There are spiders! Veronica screamed suddenly, her voice shrill and terrified. Get them off me! Get them off! It was brilliant. She was channeling every fear, every frustration of the last few weeks, and projecting it into this moment. Tiffany laughed, a low, dark sound. Keep going. Mom, tell me about the spiders. They are in my hair. They are eating my memories. Veronica sobbed, thrashing against the paper-covered table. Harrison, where is Harrison? He promised to save me from the spiders. Oh, Harrison cannot save you now, Tiffany taunted. Moving the phone closer, I could hear her movement. I could imagine the lens hovering inches from Veronica, sweating face. Look at you. You are completely gone, aren't you? I am the Queen of France, Veronica yelled, throwing in a touch of absurdity we had discussed. I order you to cut off their heads. Perfect, Tiffany whispered. Got it. She filmed for another 10 minutes, goading Veronica, mocking her, capturing what she thought was a psychotic break induced by drugs. She did not know she was filming a woman fighting for her life, with the only weapon she had, her wits. Okay, that is enough, Tiffany finally said, snapping the phone shut. Rest now, Mom, save your energy for the hearing. She walked out of the room, leaving Veronica sobbing on the table. Sobbing real tears, now tears of relief and trauma. I sat back in my leather chair, physically exhausted. As if I had been the one on that table, my shirt was stuck to my back with cold sweat. They had the video, they had the medical report Dr. Aris would sign falsifying the drug administration. They had the weapon to put Veronica away, but they had forgotten the most important rule of evidence, chain of custody. They thought they controlled the narrative, but I controlled the facts. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Carla, the nurse. Secure the vial swap. The labels keep the saline syringe with Veronica DNA on it in the fridge. I will pick it up tonight. Done came the reply. I had the physical evidence that no drugs were administered. I had the audio of Tiffany coaching and mocking her. I had the proof of the conspiracy. An hour later, the Mercedes pulled back into the driveway. I met them at the door. Tiffany helped Veronica out of the car, gripping her arm tightly. Veronica looked pale, exhausted, her eyes red from crying. She collapsed into my arms, burying her face in my chest. "Oh, Harrison," Tiffany sighed, shaking her head with tragic theatricality. "It was awful, Dad. Worse than we thought. She had a complete episode at the clinic, screaming about spiders, thinking she was royalty. Dr. Aris says it is advanced, rapid-onset dementia," he says. "She is a danger to herself." I held my wife tight, feeling her heart hammering against my ribs. She squeezed my hand 3 times, safe. I looked at Tiffany, looking at the triumphant gleam in her eyes, hiding behind the mask of concern. "I am so sorry to hear that," I said, my voice trembling with fake grief. "What do we do now?" Tiffany placed a hand on my shoulder, her touch burning like ice. "We have to be strong, Dad. We have to do the hard thing. Preston has set up a family meeting for tomorrow, a formal intervention. We are going to present the evidence to the family lawyer and start the process for the conservatorship. It is the only way to save her, yes," I said, looking down at Veronica, who was hiding her face to conceal the hatred in her eyes. "Tomorrow, the intervention." I walked Veronica inside, leaving Tiffany standing in the driveway, victorious. She thought she had won the war. She did not know she had just walked into the kill box. Tomorrow would be the intervention. All right, but it would not be for Veronica. It would be for the woman who tried to destroy her. The living room of my estate had been transformed into a courtroom. The furniture had been rearranged, the chairs positioned in a semi-circle facing the large television screen on the wall. It was a stage set for a tragedy, and my son Preston was the director. It was 2:00 in the afternoon. The autumn sky was overcast, casting a gray pallor over the room. I sat next to Veronica, holding her hand, which was cold and clammy. She was dressed in a simple beige cardigan and slacks, looking every bit the confused elderly woman they wanted her to be. But I could feel the tension in her grip, the steel resolve beneath the fragile exterior. Preston stood by the fireplace, looking solemn and important. In his navy blue suit, next to him sat Tiffany, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, playing the role of the grieving daughter-in-law to the hilt. Behind them sat 2 strangers, a man with a briefcase who introduced himself as Mr. Sterling, a family law attorney specializing in elder care, and Dr. Aris looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit, his eyes darting around the room, avoiding mine. "Thank you all for coming," Preston began, his voice grave. "This is the hardest thing I have ever had to do. But as a family, we must face reality. We must protect Mom from herself." He gestured to Mr. Sterling, who opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. Legal petitions for conservatorship, transfer of power of attorney, and a restructuring of the Bennett family trust. "Before we discuss the legalities," Preston continued, "I think it is important that everyone understands the severity of the situation. Dad, I know you have been trying to manage this privately, but it has gone beyond simple forgetfulness. It has become dangerous." Tiffany let out a small sob. "Preston, show them the videos," she whispered. "Show them why we have to do this." Preston picked up a remote control and pointed it at the television. The screen flickered to life. The first video played. It was the footage from the Motel 6, grainy and dark, but clear enough. The woman in the Burberry coat walking into the room, the men following her, the door closing. It looked damning. It looked like the secret life of a woman who had lost her moral compass. I watched Veronica face. She did not flinch. She stared at the screen with a blank expression, exactly as we had practiced. "That was last week," Preston said, his voice heavy with shame. "Mom disappearing into a motel with strangers. We found drug paraphernalia in her purse. Dad, we found evidence of high-risk behavior." He clicked the remote again. The second video played the masterpiece from the clinic. Veronica screaming about spiders thrashing on the table, her eyes wild. her voice shrill and terrified. "The Queen of France," she screamed on the screen. "Cut off their heads." The video ended, leaving a ringing silence in the room. Tiffany burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. "Oh God," she wailed. "It breaks my heart to see her like that. She is not herself anymore. She is gone, the mom we knew is gone." Dr. Aris cleared his throat. "Stepping forward professionally, based on my examination, and these documented episodes," he said, smoothing his tie. "It is my professional opinion that Mrs. Bennett is suffering from advanced, rapid-onset dementia with psychotic features. She is a danger to herself and potentially to others. She requires immediate institutional care in a secure facility." Mr. Sterling, the lawyer, nodded solemnly. "Given the medical diagnosis, Mr. Bennett, the court will almost certainly grant an emergency conservatorship. It is in everyone's best interest that you sign these voluntary transfer papers. Now it will save the family the embarrassment of a public trial. It will allow Preston to manage the assets and ensure Mrs. Bennett gets the care she needs." I looked at the papers on the coffee table. They were not just asking for custody of Veronica, they were asking for control of everything: the house, the accounts, the investments, the legacy I had built over 40 years. They were asking me to sign my life away. Preston walked over to me, a pen in his hand. "Dad," he said, his voice soft, persuasive, "please do it for Mom. Do it so we can help her. You are tired." "Dad, I can see it. Let me take this burden off your shoulders. Let me lead the family now." I looked at my son. I saw the greed in his eyes masked as concern. I saw the desperation of a man who owed millions to the mob and thought he had found a way out. I saw the betrayal. I took the pen, my hand trembling slightly, not from age but from the sheer effort of holding back the rage. "You want me to sign this?" I asked, my voice quiet. "Yes." "Dad, please," Preston said, pushing the papers closer. I looked at Tiffany. She was watching me through her fingers, her eyes sharp, predatory, waiting for the kill. I looked at Veronica. She squeezed my hand 3 times, safe. I put the pen down on the table with a soft click. "I cannot sign this," I said. The room froze. Preston. Smile faltered. "What? Why?" "Dad, you saw the videos, you heard the doctor." "Because," I said, standing up, slowly leaning on my cane for effect. "Because if I sign this, I would be admitting that my wife is crazy, and I do not believe she is." Tiffany stood up, her voice rising in panic. "Dad, the video, she was screaming about spiders. She was in a motel with hookers. What more proof do you need?" "I need the truth," I said, my voice hardening, losing the tremor, gaining the steel of the silencer. "I need to know why the woman in the motel walked like a runway model when Veronica has had a limp for 5 years. Tiffany's eyes widened. She took a step back. "I need to know." I continued walking toward the television. Why my wife was screaming about spiders in a clinic room, when she has never been afraid of spiders in her life, but she is terrified of snakes. "I need to know," I said, turning to face Dr. Aris, "why a medical professional would prescribe a sedative that turns out to be saline solution, Dr. Arrow." Aris' face went white. "How did you?" he stammered. "And most of all," I said, turning to Preston, "I need to know why my son is so desperate to control my money that he would destroy his own family to pay off a gambling debt." Preston, hit your jaw dropped. "Oh, Dad, what are you talking about, gambling debt?" "I do not have a gambling debt." I reached into my jacket pocket. Not for a handkerchief, but for a flash drive. I walked over to the television and plugged it in. "Sit down," I commanded, my voice booming through the room. "Sit down, all of you. The presentation is not over yet." I clicked the remote. The screen changed, showing a new video. It was not Veronica in a motel. It was Tiffany in a motel room, stripped down to red lingerie, holding a glass pipe, laughing with a cameraman. Got the shot. Tiffany's voice on the screen said, clear and arrogant. Let us do one more take, make sure we see the face. The room went silent, a different kind of silence, a silence of horror, of exposure. Tiffany let out a strangled sound, a gasp that sounded like a dying animal. No. She whispered, that is fake, that is. I clicked the remote again. A new image appeared, a spreadsheet. Bank records, transfers, dates, amounts. The $3.2 million debt to the Black Dragon Syndicate, the transfer of that debt to Phoenix Holdings, and finally a live feed from a hidden camera in the hallway, showing 2 uniformed police officers standing quietly outside the front door, waiting for my signal. I looked at my son. His face was gray, the color of ash. You wanted an intervention. Preston, I said, my voice cold and final. Well, you got one, but it is not for Veronica. It is for you. I looked at Mr. Sterling, the lawyer who was frantically stuffing papers back into his briefcase. Sit down, counselor, I barked. You are not going anywhere. You are going to witness this. I turned to Veronica. Stand up. My love, show them who you really are. Veronica stood up. She shed the blanket. She shed the confusion. She shed the act. She stood tall, her eyes blazing with a fire that had been suppressed for weeks. She looked at Tiffany, who was trembling in her chair. You wanted my life, Veronica said, her voice steady and strong. You wanted my house, you wanted my husband. Well, you can have the attention now, Tiffany, all of it. I walked over to the door and opened it wide. Gentlemen, I said to the officers, come in. Believe there has been a fraud committed here, a massive fraud, and I have the perpetrators right here in my living room. The intervention was over, the trial had begun, and the verdict was already written in the terror on my son's face. The silence in the living room was heavy and suffocating, like the air before a thunderstorm. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for the old man to break, waiting for me to sign the papers that would erase my wife's existence and hand over my empire. I sat there for a long moment, letting the weight of their betrayal settle on my shoulders. I looked at the television screen, where the image of the woman screaming about spiders was frozen, a digital portrait of madness manufactured by the people I was supposed to trust. I turned my gaze to Preston, my only son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, who was now standing over me like a vulture, waiting for the carcass to stop twitching. I needed him to say it one more time. I needed him to commit to the lie so deeply that there would be no climbing back out. Preston, I said, my voice low and devoid of emotion, look at me. He hesitated, but then met my gaze. His eyes were hard, desperate. Are you sure? I asked slowly. Are you absolutely 100% certain that the woman in those videos is your mother? Are you sure? That is Veronica? Preston did not blink. He did not flinch. He straightened his tie, a gesture of arrogance that he had learned from me, but used without my integrity. I am sure, Dad, he said, his voice firm, echoing off the high ceilings. It is her car, it is her coat, it is her voice. I wish it were not true, but we have to face facts. She is sick, and she is out of control. I looked at Tiffany. She was nodding vigorously, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, pretending to be heartbroken, while her leg bounced with nervous energy. She thought she had won. She thought the finish line was crossed. And you, Tiffany, I asked, turning to her, you saw her leave. You saw her come back. You are certain this is not some mistake. Oh, Harrison, she sighed. It breaks my heart to say it. But yes, I saw her with my own eyes. I saw the madness in them. Good. I said quietly. I stood up. The cane I had been using as a prop fell to the floor. With a loud clatter. I did not reach for it. I did not need it anymore. I stood to my full height, straightening my spine, shedding the skin of the frail, confused grandfather. In a split second, the air in the room shifted. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees, Mr. Sterling. The lawyer shifted in his seat, sensing the change in atmospheric pressure. Dr. Aris loosened his collar. a bead of sweat appearing on his forehead. I walked over to the media console, my steps firm and measured. I did not look like a man in grief. I looked like a man at work if we are going to talk about facts. I said, my voice gaining power, filling the room. Then we should look at all the facts, not just the ones you edited. I pulled the flash drive from the television, the one containing their fabricated evidence, and I tossed it onto the coffee table. It skidded across the wood and stopped at Preston's feet. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out another drive, a small silver one that looked like a bullet. I plugged it into the port. You showed us your movie, Preston, I said, picking up the remote. Now, let me show you mine. I pressed play. The screen did not show a motel room or a clinic. It showed a distorted circular view, a fisheye perspective looking out at a world that was tilting and moving. It took a moment for everyone to realize what they were seeing. What is this? Preston asked, his voice tight with confusion. Just watch, I commanded. On the screen, the camera moved. It was attached to something fabric, something beige. It swung around and then stopped, facing a large illuminated mirror. The room in the video was a bathroom, but not just any bathroom. It was the guest bathroom in this very house. The marble countertops were unmistakable. In the mirror stood a woman. She was not Veronica. She was younger, sharper. She was wearing a wig cap, pulling her dark hair back tight against her skull. She was applying makeup, thick, heavy layers of foundation, to pale her skin, to make her look older, tired. She was contouring her face to mimic the hollows of a woman, 20 years her senior. It was Tiffany. The Tiffany in the room gasped, a sound, like all the air leaving her lungs at once. She clamped a hand over her mouth, her eyes bulging in horror. On the screen, the video. Tiffany reached for a platinum blonde wig sitting on the counter. She pulled it on, adjusting the strands, checking the profile in the mirror. She practiced a facial expression, a confused, vacant stare that mimicked Veronica perfectly. Then she reached for something hanging on the hook behind her. It was the beige Burberry trench coat. I paused the video. The image of Tiffany, frozen in the act of stealing my wife's identity, hung over the room like a guillotine. Blade that coat, I said, my voice slicing through the silence like a razor. I bought that for Veronica last week. It is a beautiful coat, classic, timeless. But Preston, you forgot one thing about your father. I walked toward him, stepping into his personal space, forcing him to look at me. I spent 40 years catching people who thought they were smarter than me. I spent a lifetime analyzing risk. Did you really think I would give my wife a $2,000 coat without protecting it, without protecting her? I pointed at the screen. The top button, I said, the second one from the collar. It is not horn, it is not plastic. It is a high-definition, wide-angle camera with a 48-hour battery life and a microphone that can pick up a whisper from across the room. Preston's face went white, the color of old ash. He looked at the screen, then at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. I pressed play again. On the screen, the video, Tiffany buttoned the coat covering the camera for a brief second, before the lens adjusted to the light shining through the buttonhole. She leaned into the mirror, applying a layer of Veronica's signature red lipstick. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed a number. She put it on speaker and set it on the counter. The voice that answered was unmistakably Preston. Are you ready? He asked on the recording. Almost, Tiffany replied, her voice clear, crisp, and full of malice. I just need to get the limp right. Make sure the guys at the motel are ready with the lighting. They are ready, Preston's voice said. Just hurry up. The old man is reading by the fire. He will not move for hours, but we cannot risk Leo seeing the car. Do not worry about the old man, Tiffany laughed, a cruel, sharp sound, applying more mascara. He is a clueless old fool. He thinks I am bringing him pastries tomorrow morning. She leaned into the mirror, checking her teeth. Then she said the words that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Get the camera ready, baby. We are going to make a movie. I'm going to snort enough fake snow to make Tony Montana blush. We are going to bury that bitch so deep she will never see daylight again. The video ended, the screen went black, the silence in the living room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. It was the silence of total, catastrophic exposure. I looked at Tiffany. She was shaking violently, her hands gripping the arms of her chair, her face a mask of terror. She looked at the lawyer, Mr. Sterling, who was slowly closing his briefcase, his face a mixture of shock and professional distance. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. I looked at Dr. Aris, who was staring at the floor, looking like he wanted to vomit. He knew his medical license was as good as gone. And then I looked at Preston. My son. He was staring at the blank screen as if hoping the image would change, as if he could rewind time and undo the last 5 minutes. You asked if I was sure. I said, my voice quiet but filling every corner of the room. You asked me to sign papers based on the fact that your mother was crazy. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the conservatorship papers. I ripped them in half, slowly, the sound of tearing paper echoing like a gunshot. Then I ripped them again and again until they were nothing but confetti. She is not the one who is crazy, Preston, I said, letting the pieces fall to the floor at his feet. She is not the one who dressed up like a caricature to frame an innocent woman. She is not the one who drugged her own mother-in-law to steal an inheritance. Preston looked up at me, tears streaming down his face, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of fear, Dad, he whispered. Please, I can explain. Explain, I roared, the anger finally breaking through the surface. Explain how you called your wife a bitch. Explain how you planned to bury her. Explain how you thought I was a clueless old fool. I leaned in close, my face inches from his. I am not clueless. Son, I am awake, and I have been awake while you were sleeping, while you were plotting, while you were counting money that was not yours. I turned to the window, where the afternoon light was fading. The game was over. The charade was done, but I was not finished with them yet. The video was just the beginning. It was the first nail in the coffin. But I had a hammer, and I had plenty more nails. The financial records, the debt, the involvement of the mob, that was the next blow, and it was going to hit them harder than any video ever could. I turned back to the room, looking at the wreckage of my family. You wanted a show, I said coldly. Well, you got one, but the finale is coming up, and trust me, you are not going to like the ending. Tiffany looked as though the blood had been drained from her body, leaving her skin the color of old parchment. She slumped in the chair, her hands gripping the armrests so tightly. Her knuckles were white. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out, just a dry rattle of air. She looked from the screen where her own voice had just condemned her to me, and then to Preston, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. She realized in that moment that the script she had written, the play she had directed, had just been rewritten by the man she thought was asleep in the audience. Preston was shaking violently now, a tremor that started in his hands and traveled up his arms until his whole body was vibrating with terror. He looked at the screen where the hidden camera footage had just ended, and then he looked at me with eyes that were no longer the eyes of an arrogant businessman, but the eyes of a frightened child caught standing over a broken vase. Dad, he stammered, his voice cracking like dry wood. You bugged Mom, Coat? You put a camera on. Your own wife. I took a step closer to him, the sound of my shoes on the hardwood floor echoing in the silence. I looked down at him with a cold detachment that scared even me. No. Preston, I said, my voice steady and low like the rumble of distant thunder. I did not put a camera on my wife, Coat. I put a camera on the thief, Coat. I knew who would take it. I knew who could not resist the urge to play dress-up. I knew that Tiffany vanity was her weakness, and I exploited it just like you tried to exploit my trust. Preston's legs gave out. He did not sit, he collapsed, falling to his knees on the Persian rug, in a heap of expensive fabric and ruined pride. He reached out and grabbed the hem of my jacket, his fingers clutching at the fabric, desperation rolling off him in waves. Dad, please, you have to understand. He sobbed, tears streaming down his face, ruining the image of the successful heir he had tried so hard to cultivate. I was forced, Dad. I did not want to do it. I swear, I did not want to hurt Mom, but I had no choice. They made me do it. Who made you do it? I asked, though. I already knew the answer. I wanted him to say it. I wanted him to admit the depth of the hole he had dug the bad men. Preston whispered, looking over his shoulder, as if he expected them to burst through the door. Right now, the loan sharks, Dad, I owe money, a lot of money. I tried to fix it. I tried to trade my way out of it with crypto, but the market crashed, and I lost everything, and then I borrowed more to try and win it back. And now they say they are going to kill me, Dad. They said they would hurt Leo. The mention of my grandson name sent a spike of adrenaline through my veins. He had put a target on his own son, back to cover his gambling addiction. He had used his child as collateral. I walked over to the side table where I had placed the thick manila folder earlier, the one containing the financial autopsy of my son's life. I picked it up, feeling the weight of it in my hand. It was heavy with his failures, heavy with his betrayals. I threw the folder onto the coffee table in front of him. It landed with a loud slap that made Tiffany jump. "You are talking about the Black Dragon Syndicate," I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. "You owe them $3.2 million. Isn't that right, Preston?" Preston head snapped up, his eyes bulging. How do you know that name? Nobody knows that name. I know everything, son. I said, I know about the $3 million you lost on those worthless altcoins. I know about the second mortgage you took out on your house. I know about the lines of credit you opened in Veronica. Name, Preston nodded frantically. Yes, that is them, the Black Dragons. They are animals, Dad. They sent me photos of Leo at school. They said if I did not pay by the end of the month, they would take him. I looked at him with disgust, not because he was in debt, but because he was a coward. Instead of coming to me, instead of facing his mistake, he had decided to sacrifice his stepmother and gaslight his father. Well, I have some news for you, Preston, I said, unbuttoning my jacket and sitting on the edge of the table, looking down at him. I handled it. Preston stopped crying for a second, confusion replacing the terror. You handled it? What do you mean? I mean that last week I made a phone call. I contacted the syndicate. Preston, face went white. You called them. Oh God. Dad, you cannot talk to them. They are killers. I am not afraid of thugs, Preston. I spent 40 years hunting men much worse than them. But I did not call to threaten them. I called to make a business transaction. I pointed at the folder on the table. Open it. Preston reached out with shaking hands and opened the file. The first page was a transfer of debt agreement, notarized and stamped. I bought your debt. Preston, I said, watching the realization slowly dawn on his face. I bought every single cent of it. The principal, the interest, the penalties. The Black Dragon Syndicate does not own you anymore. They were very happy to accept my wire transfer. They sold your paper for 80 cents on the dollar and walked away. They are gone. Preston looked at the document, reading the words over and over. His lips moving silently, then he looked at the name of the new creditor listed at the bottom of the page. Phoenix Holdings, he read aloud, his brow furrowing. Who is Phoenix Holdings? Dad. Did you hire a company to help me? I leaned in close, my face inches from his so he could see the hard truth in my eyes. I did not hire them, Preston. I am them. I am the sole director and shareholder of Phoenix Holdings. Preston's mouth fell open. He looked from the paper to me, his brain trying to process the shift in reality. You, he whispered. You bought the debt. Yes, I said, and I stood up, towering over him again. Congratulations, son. You do not owe the mob anymore. You do not have to worry about thugs breaking your legs or coming for Leo. That threat is gone. Preston let out a breath, a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Oh, thank God, Dad. Thank you, thank you. I knew you would save me. I knew you would fix it. I promise I will pay you back. I will work hard. I will. I held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Save you? I asked, my voice dropping an octave. No, Preston, you are confused. I did not do this to save you. I did this to own you. Preston's smile faltered, the relief dying in his eyes. What, you think the mob is scary? I asked, walking slowly around him, circling him like a shark. You think they are tough because they have baseball bats and guns. Son, you have no idea what scary is. I stopped in front of him and leaned down, my hands on my knees. The mob wants money. They are just businessmen with bad tempers. But me, I am a father whose son tried to put his wife in a mental institution. I am a grandfather whose son put his grandson in the crosshairs of a gang. I am not looking for a return on investment. Preston, I am looking for justice. Preston swallowed hard, his Adam apple bobbing in his throat. Dad, what are you saying? I am saying that I am your creditor now, I said, my voice cold as ice, and unlike the mob, I do not break legs, I break lives. I have the legal right to seize everything you own, your house, your car, your accounts. I can garnish your future wages until you are 90. I can bankrupt you so thoroughly that you will not be able to get a credit card to buy a sandwich. Tiffany let out a whimper from her chair. She realized finally that the gravy train had not just derailed, it had exploded. She realized that the debt was now held by the man she had just mocked on video. I looked at Tiffany, then back at Preston. My collection methods are going to be much more strict than theirs, I continued, because I am not interested in money. I have plenty of money. I am interested in penance. I am interested in making sure you never hurt anyone in this family ever again. Preston looked at the floor, the reality of his situation settling in. He had traded a physical threat for a total existential annihilation. He was not free, he was property, so here is how this is going to work. I said, straightening up and adjusting my cuffs. You are going to do exactly what I say from this moment forward, or I will exercise every right I have under that contract, and I will leave you destitute. Do you understand me? Preston nodded, tears dripping onto the expensive rug. Yes. Dad, understand good, I said. I turned to Mr. Sterling, the lawyer who was sitting in the corner trying to make himself invisible. Mr. Sterling, I said pleasantly. I believe you have some papers for a conservatorship in your briefcase. Yes, Mr. Bennett, he squeaked, clutching the bag. Burn them, I said. Then I turned to the two police officers standing by the door who had watched the whole scene in silence. Officers, I said, pointing at Tiffany. I believe we have enough evidence now to proceed with the arrest regarding the impersonation and the drugs. Tiffany screamed, a high piercing sound, as the officers stepped forward, pulling the handcuffs from their belts. Preston tried to stand up to intervene, but I put a hand on his shoulder, pushing him back down to his knees. Stay there, son, I said. You are not done yet. You and I have a contract to discuss. I watched as they cuffed Tiffany as she wailed and cursed, blaming everyone but herself. I watched as they led her out the door, her red soles scraping against the floor. Then I looked back at my son, kneeling in the wreckage of his life. Now, I said, let us talk about the terms of your surrender. The air in the room was brittle, snapping with the tension of a wire pulled too tight. Tiffany stood near the fireplace, her chest heaving, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal, looking for a way out. She looked at the officers standing stoically by the entrance. She looked at Preston, sobbing on his knees, and she looked at me, the man she had underestimated, the man she had mocked then. Instinct took over, the instinct of a rat on a sinking ship. She kicked off her expensive red-soled heels and bolted. She did not run toward her husband to comfort him. She did not run toward me to beg for mercy. She ran for the hallway door, the one that led to the back terrace and the freedom of the dark woods beyond the estate. She moved fast, fueled by adrenaline and terror, but she was not fast enough. Leo, my grandson, stepped out from the shadows of the foyer. He did not look like a frightened teenager anymore. He looked like a Bennett. He stood squarely in the doorframe, blocking her path. His arms crossed over his chest, his face set in a mask of grim determination. Move, Leo! Tiffany shrieked, her hands reaching out to shove him aside. Move, you stupid boy! Get out of my way! Leo did not budge. He took the shove, he took the nails digging into his shoulder. But he did not step aside. Instead, he reached behind him and turned the deadbolt on the heavy oak front door, unlocking it. Not for her, but for the person standing on the other side. He pulled the door open, revealing the imposing figure of Chief Miller, the head of the local police department, and my fishing buddy for 20 years. Miller was in full uniform, his face hard and unsmiling, flanked by 2 more officers. "Hello, Grandma," Leo said, his voice cracking slightly, but holding firm. "I think these gentlemen are here for you." Tiffany skidded to a halt, her bare feet sliding on the polished wood. She looked from Miller to Leo and then back at me, realization crashing down on her. She was surrounded. "She was done, Chief." Miller stepped into the foyer, filling the space with the heavy authority of the law. "Harrison." He nodded at me solemnly. "I got your call, and the courier with the preliminary evidence packet. Are we ready to proceed?" I walked over to the side table where I had organized the physical evidence in a neat stack. I picked up the black evidence bag, containing the vial and the syringe Carla the nurse had saved for me. "We are ready, Jim," I said, walking toward them, my steps echoing on the floorboards. I handed the bag to the chief. "This contains a syringe prepared by Mrs. Tiffany Bennett, intended to be injected into my wife, Veronica Bennett. Yesterday morning, I said, my voice loud enough for the officers recording the scene to pick up. Clearly, she believed it was a powerful antipsychotic cocktail, designed to induce a mental breakdown, creating grounds for an involuntary commitment. It is actually saline solution. But the intent to cause bodily harm and distress is clear. That is attempted assault and elder abuse." Tiffany shook her head violently, backing away until she hit the wall. No, that is a lie. That is a medical procedure." I was following. "Doctor orders," I ignored her and handed Miller a thick file folder. "This file contains the forensic accounting of the last 6 months." I continued listing the crimes, like I was reading a grocery list. Identity theft. Mrs. Bennett used my wife's social security number to open 5 lines of credit card fraud, totaling over $200,000, bank fraud, involving a falsified home equity line of credit application. I pulled out the flash drive, the one with the video of Tiffany in the motel room. And this drive contains evidence of impersonation, criminal conspiracy, and possession of a controlled schedule. 2 substances, the narcotics she is seen holding in the video, were found in her glove compartment an hour ago by your deputies executing the search warrant on her vehicle. Tiffany let out a strangled cry. "No, you cannot do this. I am a mother. I have a reputation." Chief Miller looked at her with cold, professional disdain. "Mrs. Tiffany Bennett, you are under arrest for identity theft, fraud, possession of narcotics, and conspiracy to commit assault. You have the right to remain silent." He gestured to his officers, and they moved in synchronized and efficient, grabbing Tiffany's arms and pulling them behind her back. The click of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the loudest sound in the room. It was the sound of a steel door slamming on a life of privilege and entitlement. Tiffany screamed. It was a raw, primal sound of fury and panic. "Get off me!" she yelled, struggling against the officer's grip. "Do not touch me. Do you know who I am?" Then she turned on Preston, her eyes wild with hatred. "Preston," she shrieked, spitting the name out like poison. "Do something. Tell them, it was your idea. Tell them you made me do it." Preston looked up from the floor, his face streaked with tears and snot. He looked at his wife, the woman he had committed crimes for, the woman he had tried to destroy his family for, and he saw her throwing him to the wolves without a second of hesitation. "It was his gambling debt," she yelled, as the officers marched her toward the door. "He owes the mob millions. He told me we had to get the money or they would kill us. He made me wear the wig. He made me get the drugs. It is all him. I am a victim here." The officers dragged her out the front door, her heels dragging on the porch, her screams fading into the night air as they shoved her into the back of the patrol car. The red and blue lights flashed against the windows of the house, illuminating the wreckage of my family. The room fell silent again, save for the heavy breathing of my son. Preston was still on his knees watching the door where his wife had just been taken away. He looked small, pathetic, a man who had built his house on sand and was now watching the tide come in. He turned to me, crawling a few inches across the rug, reaching for my hand, but stopping short when he saw the look in my eyes. "Dad." He whimpered, his voice broken. "Please, you have to help me." You heard her. "She is blaming me for everything. She is going to bury me to save herself. You know the lawyers." "Dad, you know the judges. Make this go away, please." I looked down at him, feeling a profound sadness, but zero pity. I had spent 40 years saving him from his mistakes. I had paid for the tutors when he failed math. I had paid the lawyers when he got a DUI in college. I had paid the investors when his first startup failed. I had been his safety net, his cushion, his fixer. "But you do not fix a rot, you cut it out. I am not going to help you, Preston," I said, my voice quiet and final. "But Dad," he pleaded, clutching his chest. "Am your son. You cannot let me go to prison. You cannot let me lose everything. I made a mistake, I know that, but I am family. Blood is thicker than water. Dad, please save me." I looked over, his head to where Leo was standing by the door. The boy was trembling, his face pale, but his eyes were dry. He was watching us, watching to see what kind of man his grandfather really was, watching to see if justice was real, or if it was just a word rich people use to punish the poor. I walked past Preston and put my hand on Leo's shoulder, feeling the tension in the boy frame. "I am not saving you, Preston," I said, looking at my grandson. "I am saving Leo." Preston recoiled as if I had slapped him. "What? You were willing to let thugs threaten your son," I said, my voice rising with the heat of my anger. "You were willing to let your wife twist his arm and bruise his flesh to keep him quiet. You were willing to burn his future to pay for your gambling addiction. You are not a father, Preston. You are a hazard." I squeezed Leo's shoulder, letting him know I was there. "I was solid. I am removing the hazard," I continued. "I am cutting the cancer out of this house so that this boy has a chance to grow up without being poisoned by your greed and your weakness. I am not sending you to jail to punish you. I am sending you to jail to protect him from you." Preston stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, unable to comprehend that the bank of Harrison Bennett was finally permanently closed. Chief Miller stepped back into the doorway, looking at Preston with a look of disappointment that mirrored my own. "Mr. Preston Bennett." "I need you to stand up," he said, taking a second pair of handcuffs from his belt. "We have a warrant for your arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and financial crimes." Preston stood up slowly, his legs shaking. He held out his hands, his head hung low, defeated. I watched as my friend cuffed my son. I watched as they read him his rights. Rights he had trampled on when he drugged his stepmother, rights he had ignored when he stole her identity. "Take him away, Jim," I said, turning my back on him. "Dad." Preston whispered one last time. I did not turn around. I looked at Leo. I pulled him into a hug, holding him tight, feeling him finally let go and sob into my jacket. "It is over, Leo," I whispered into his hair. "They are gone. You are safe now." I heard the door close. I heard the engine of the patrol car start up and drive away, taking my son and his wife to the booking center, where they would be processed, fingerprinted, and stripped of their names, replacing them with inmate numbers. I held my grandson, the only Bennett left who was worth saving, and I felt the weight of the night begin to lift. The war was won, the enemy was captured, but there was one more piece of business to attend to. One final contract to sign that would ensure Preston never threatened us again. The visiting room at the county detention center smelled of industrial bleach and stale sweat. It was a smell that stripped away dignity, a smell that leveled everyone who walked through the heavy steel doors. I sat on a metal stool bolted to the floor, my hands resting on the cold, stainless steel table waiting for the prisoner to be brought in. I was not wearing my usual suit today. I was wearing casual clothes, a sweater and slacks, because I did not come here as a businessman or an investigator. I came here as a father who had to perform an amputation to save the patient. The door on the far side of the room buzzed and clicked open. A guard stepped through, followed by a man in an orange jumpsuit who shuffled in with his head down. his wrists shackled to his waist. It took me a moment to recognize him, stripped of his Italian suits, his expensive haircut, and his arrogance. Preston looked like a stranger. He looked older, smaller, a hollow shell of the man who had tried to steal my life. He sat down opposite me, the chains rattling against the table. He looked up, his eyes red and swollen, rimmed with dark circles of exhaustion. When he saw me, a flicker of hope ignited in his gaze. A desperate, pathetic spark. "Dad!" He croaked, his voice rough from disuse or crying. "Thank God you came. You have to get me out of here. It is a nightmare in here. The noise, the people, I cannot survive this. Please tell me you posted bail. Tell me I am coming home." I looked at him calmly, letting the silence stretch between us until his hope began to curdle into fear. I did not reach out to touch him. I did not offer comfort. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single thick document bound with a heavy clip. "I am not posting bail." "Preston," I said, my voice flat and even, "I'm not getting you out today, and you are not coming home, not to the estate, not to your house in Bel Air, not to the life you knew." "That life is over?" Preston, face crumbled. He looked like he had been physically struck. "But Dad, you said you bought the debt. You said you owned me. You can stop this. I do own you," I confirmed, opening the document on the table. "And that is why I am here. I am here to offer you a deal, a plea bargain between you and me." Preston leaned forward, straining against his chains. "What kind of deal?" I looked him in the eye. "I have spoken to the district attorney. I have shown him the evidence against Tiffany, the video, the drugs, the identity theft. She is going down. Preston, she is looking at 10 to 15 years, and she is turning on you. She is singing like a bird, telling them everything was your idea. She is trying to trade you for a lighter sentence." Preston whimpered. "I told you she would. She is a snake. She is." I agreed, but here is the reality, son. I can corroborate her story. I can hand over the financial records that show you orchestrating the transfers. I can testify that you forged my signature. I can put you in a cell right next to her for the next decade." Preston started to cry, soft, jagged sobs that shook his shoulders. "Please, Dad, do not." Or I continued, my voice cutting through his tears. "I can tell the district attorney that you were a pawn, that you were manipulated by a sociopathic wife and forced under duress due to your gambling addiction. I can refuse to press charges for the fraud against my accounts. If I withdraw my cooperation on the fraud charges, the case against you weakens significantly. You might get off with probation and time served." Preston looked up, hope returning wildly. "Really, you would do that?" I held up a hand, silence. "I am not done, that is my offer. But it comes with a price. A very steep price. This is a contract, Preston. A binding agreement between us. If you sign it, I help you avoid prison. If you do not, I leave you here to rot." I turned the document around so he could read it. "Condition 1, I said, pointing to the first paragraph. "You will sign full sole legal and physical custody of Leo over to me and Veronica. You will terminate your parental rights voluntarily. You will not see him. You will not speak to him. You will not know him until he is 18 and decides if he wants to know you." Preston gasped. "No." "Dad, I cannot. He is my son. You lost the right to be a father when you let him be threatened by the mob." I snapped, my voice rising. "I am not negotiating this. Leo needs stability. He needs safety. He needs to be far away from the toxicity you and Tiffany created. You will sign him over or you go to prison." Preston put his head in his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. He knew I was right. He knew he had failed the boy in the worst possible way. Condition 2. I continued, relentless. "You have an addiction, Preston. You are a gambler and a weak man. You need to be broken down and rebuilt from the ground up." I tapped the second paragraph. "I have arranged a bed for you at the Northward Bound Rehabilitation Center. It is not a spa. Preston, there are no massages, no pools. It is a working facility in the wilderness of Alaska. You will go there immediately upon your release. You will stay for 2 years. You will work, you will chop wood, you will clean latrines, you will freeze, and you will learn what it means to survive without a credit card or a daddy to bail you out. If you leave early, if you fail a drug test, if you break a single rule, the deal is void, and I hand the evidence to the DA. Alaska Preston whispered horror in his eyes. 2 years. 2 years to purge the entitlement out of your system, I said. 2 years to become a man. And finally, condition 3, I flipped to the last page. You are disinherited. Preston, completely and irrevocably. I am rewriting my will today. You get nothing, no trust fund, no stocks, no real estate, not a single penny. When you finish your time in Alaska, you will be 44 years old. You will be clean, and you will be free, but you will be poor. You will have to get a job. You will have to earn a living with your hands. You will have to learn the value of $1. The way I did, Preston stared at the paper. His face a mask of shock. Losing the money seemed to hit him harder than losing the child, which only confirmed that I was doing the right thing. Dad, you cannot leave me with nothing, he pleaded. How will I live? You will figure it out, I said coldly. Millions of people do it every day. Millions of people do not have a father worth a fortune, and they manage just fine. You are smart, Preston. You have a degree, use it. Work for the first time in your life, actually. Work. I took a heavy black pen from my pocket and set it down on the document. Those are the terms. Take it or leave it. Sign the paper and you go to Alaska. And maybe one day you can look yourself in the mirror again, refuse. And you go to federal prison, and I forget I ever had a son. The room was silent except for the buzzing of the fluorescent lights and the sound of Preston breathing. He looked at the pen, he looked at me, searching for a crack in the armor, searching for the soft, indulgent father he used to know. He did not find him. That father was gone, killed by the betrayal. Preston's hand shook as he reached for the pen. His fingers were clumsy in the cuffs. He looked at the clause about Leo, tears dropping onto the paper, staining the legal text. He hesitated, the pen hovering over the signature line. I am sorry, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I am so sorry. Dad, do not tell me, I said. Show me, sign. He pressed the pen to the paper and scratched his signature. It was shaky, weak, not the bold, arrogant signature he used to sign fraudulent contracts. It was the signature of a defeated man. He signed the custody waiver. He signed the agreement to enter rehab. He signed the acknowledgement of disinheritance. When he was done, he dropped the pen and slumped back in his chair, looking small and broken. I took the papers and checked them, ensuring everything was in order. I put them back in my bag. I stood up, looking down at him one last time. The lawyers will arrange your transfer to the rehab center next week, I said. I will take care of Leo. He will be loved. He will be safe, and he will know that his father did the one decent thing he could do. He let him go. Preston nodded, his eyes fixed on the table. Goodbye, Preston, I said. I turned and walked toward the door. I did not look back. I heard him start to sob again, a lonely, desolate sound that echoed off the concrete walls. It broke my heart to leave him there, to leave my own son in a cage, but I knew it was the only way to save him from himself. I walked out of the detention center into the bright afternoon sunlight. The air tasted fresh and clean. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs. I felt lighter. The cancer was cut out. The wound would scar, but the body would survive. I got into my car where Veronica was waiting. She looked anxious. Her hands clasped in her lap. It is done, I said, starting the engine. He signed. Veronica let out a long breath, tears filling her eyes, and Leo. He is ours, I said. He is safe, and I drove away from the jail, leaving the past in the rearview mirror. We had a long road ahead of us, healing Leo, raising a teenager at 70, recovering from the trauma. But we were together, and we were free. The nightmare was over. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the future was something we could build, not something we had to fear. The squeak of rubber sneakers on polished hardwood echoed through the high ceiling of the gymnasium. The air smelled of popcorn and floor wax, a scent that felt miles away from the antiseptic stench of the clinic or the stale despair of the detention center. I sat in the bleachers on a hard plastic seat, my back protesting slightly, but I did not mind, next to me. Veronica cheered, clapping her hands, her face flushed with excitement. She looked radiant. The gray pallor of the drugs was gone, replaced by the healthy glow of a woman who had reclaimed her life. She was wearing the Burberry coat, the real one, not the prop Tiffany had stolen, and she wore it like armor. On the court number 23 was dribbling down the paint, moving with a fluidity and confidence that made my chest swell. Leo, he was taller now, filling out his frame. The shadows under his eyes had vanished, the nervous twitch in his shoulder. The one that appeared whenever his mother walked into a room was gone. He was smiling. Even as he focused on the game, he faked left, drove right, and laid the ball into the hoop with a smooth, easy grace. The buzzer sounded game over. He looked up into the stands, scanning the crowd until he found us. He waved a big, unself-conscious wave that said, "I see you, and I know you are there for me." I waved back, feeling a lump in my throat that had nothing to do with sadness and everything to do with relief. We had done it. We had pulled him out of the fire before he got burned. It had been exactly 1 year since the nightmare ended, since the handcuffs clicked and the doors closed. 1 year of therapy for Leo. 1 year of quiet healing for Veronica, and 1 year of silence from the north. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and touched the envelope that had arrived that morning. It was thick, rough paper, slightly crumpled. The postmark was stamped Dutch Harbor, Alaska. I had not opened it in the house. I wanted to read it here, surrounded by the evidence of my victory, surrounded by the safety I had bought with my ruthlessness. While Veronica went down to the court to hug Leo, I stepped outside the gym into the crisp autumn air set leaning against the brick wall of the school building. I tore open the envelope. There was no request for money inside. There was no guilt trip, no excuses, just a single sheet of lined paper covered in handwriting that was rougher than I remembered, scrawled by hands that were likely calloused and sore. "Dear Dad," the letter began. "I am writing this from the bunkhouse. The shift just ended. We processed 40 tons of cod today. My back feels like it is breaking, and I smell like fish guts that will never wash off. And for the first time in my life, I feel useful. I know you probably hate me. I know I deserve it, but I wanted you to know that you were right about the cold. It wakes you up. I have not made a bet in 6 months. I have not told a lie in 6 months, mostly because out here, if you lie, the ocean kills you, or the foreman knocks you out. I think about Leo every day. I hope he is happy. I hope he forgets the man I was, and maybe someday gets to meet the man I am trying to become. Do not send money. I made my rent this week with my own hands. Tell Mom I am sorry. Tell her I am sorry I was weak." I signed the paper. Preston. I lowered the letter, my hand trembling just a fraction. He did not ask for bail. He did not ask for a transfer. He did not ask for a lawyer. He simply told me he was working. For 42 years, I had tried to buy him a personality. I had tried to cushion every fall, and in doing so, I had crippled him. I had turned him into a soft, entitled monster who thought the world owed him a living. It took sending him to the edge of the world. It took stripping him of his name and his comfort to finally introduce him to reality. I folded the letter and put it back in my pocket. I would show it to Veronica later tonight. She would cry. But they would be tears of hope, not despair. Preston was alive. He was suffering, yes, but it was the suffering of growth, the suffering of a muscle tearing, so it could rebuild stronger. He was finally becoming a man, 12 months in a fish. Cannery had done what 4 decades of private schools and trust funds could not. I looked through the glass doors of the gym. Inside, Leo was laughing with his teammates. Veronica was handing out orange slices, acting the part of the proud grandmother perfectly. She was safe. The sharks were gone. The imposters were in prison or in exile. I realized then that this was my greatest case, the investigation of a lifetime. I had caught the bad guys. I had saved the victims and I had recovered the assets. But the asset was not the money. The asset was the boy inside that gym. People say blood is thicker than water. That family is everything. And you should support them, no matter what. But they are wrong sometimes to protect the clean blood, to save the future. You have to cut off the necrotic tissue. You have to be the surgeon who removes the rot so the body can survive. I did not lose a son that day in the jail. I saved him. I taught him the lesson. I should have taught him 20 years ago, the lesson that there is no free lunch in this world, that actions have consequences, and that no crime goes unpaid. I watched Leo walk toward the door, his gym bag slung over his shoulder. He looked happy, he looked light. He did not look like a boy who was afraid of his parents anymore. I pushed off the wall and walked to meet them. "Ready to go, Grandpa?" Leo asked, grinning. "Ready," I said, putting my arm around his shoulders. "Let us go home." We walked to the car, the Lexus gleaming in the parking lot, the same car that had been used to frame us, now just a vehicle again. I drove them home, listening to Leo recount every play of the game, listening to Veronica laugh, and for the first time in a long time, the silence in my head was not the silence of a hunter waiting for prey. It was the silence of a watchman who knows the gate is secure. My name is Harrison Bennett, and I am the silencer. I silenced the greed, I silenced the lies, and in the end I silenced the fear in my family. That is a legacy worth more than any trust fund. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who need the hardest lessons. True love is not about saying yes, it is about having the courage to say no, to say stop, to say enough. Enabling is not love. It is a slow poison, breaking the cycle of dependency and entitlement. Is the hardest thing a parent can do, but it is the only way to raise a child who can stand on their own 2 feet. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever had to make a tough choice to save someone you love from themselves, please hit that like button and share this video. It helps us reach more people who might be struggling with these same hard truths. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about justice, resilience, and the reality of life. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to practice tough love? How did it change your relationship? I read every comment, and I want to hear your story. Until next time, stay strong, stay vigilant, and remember, family is what you build, not just what you are born with.